afternoon, everyone. Just to introduce myself, my name's Nicole Core and I'm the Marketing Director at Medigold Health and I head up our webinar programme. I'm delighted to welcome you this afternoon to our Embracing Neurodiversity, Strategies for Attracting and Supporting Diverse Talent. We've got a fantastic panel and some fantastic content to cover with you over the next hour. I'll run through a few bits of housekeeping. As you may have heard at the start, the webinar is being recorded and a link to the recording will be emailed out tomorrow. Please feel free to share this with any of your colleagues or friends, family, anyone that you think may benefit from the content within the webinar. We don't actually share the slide deck. It is a commercial content for us, the slides. So we do share the recording, but not the slide deck. And you'll notice at the bottom of your screen, if you're not familiar with Zoom, there's a little Q&A tab. Please feel free to use that function throughout the webinar. Pop any questions that you've got for the panelists in there. We've got a dedicated Q&A section at the end of the webinar, and our panelists will try their best to answer as many questions as possible. And enjoy the webinar. So what I'll do is I shall pass over to Kath to start the panel introductions. Over to you, Kath.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kath Wood, and I'm a disability training consultancy specialist for Medigold Health. I've worked in the field of disability, neurodiversity, and mental health for all of my career, which is 25 plus years, and for the last 15 years in relation to the workplace. So looking forward to this session. Thanks. Over to Helen.
Thank you, Kath. So hello, everyone. My name's Helen. I'm the Neurodiversity team lead here at Medigold Health. My background is predominantly neurodiversity and mental health area as well as physical disabilities too, predominantly surrounding the workplace, but I do have some experience within education and universities as well, carrying out assessments for disabled students and disabled people within the workplace. I've been doing that since about 2014, so 10 years now. It flies by. So yeah, welcome to the webinar. Over to Alice.
Hi, I was about to say good morning. It's not the morning. I don't know what time of day it is. My name's Alice. I work with Kath. I'm one of the disability training and consultancy specialists, which is a very long job title, but it's a really cool job to do. I come at this from a lived experience background. I come from a very neurodiverse family, and I have a particular interest in the topic that we're discussing today. So I think we're gonna rock and roll. We're gonna get through some slides, and everyone's gonna have a lot of fun. So hello, welcome, Croeso. Those are the only two languages I know, but I do like to show off. We're here today discussing embracing neurodiversity, so the strategies for attracting and supporting neurodiverse talent. We've got a few aims of the day. So what neurodiversity can bring to your business, how to attract neurodiverse talent, how to make the necessary adjustments, and then of course the benefits of workplace adjustments and how the workplace needs assessments can be of benefit to both the individuals and the business as a whole. So let's talk neurodiversity then. It describes the idea that people experience and interact with the world around them in many different ways. So the quote from the Harvard Medical School really explains it well. It's a term that describes the different ways that brains develop and ultimately function. Now, the term neurodiversity is also used as an umbrella term for a number of conditions, and that includes dyslexia, dyspraxia, ADHD, autism spectrum conditions, dyscalculia, Mears-Island syndrome, and Tourette's. Now, as this illustrates, there is a considerable overlap between the various conditions. So some people will have multiple diagnoses or indeed just experience a range of symptoms from a number of conditions. Now, neurodiversity is the preferred term. So it describes the different ways that brains develop and function, and using the term highlights a different set of skills and abilities and different ways of thinking. Now, lots of people with these conditions will prefer the term neurodiverse condition or learning difference, as they don't consider themselves to be disabled, and the term learning difficulty has many negative connotations. Now, the term neurodiverse is a collective term, so a group of people, a community, a condition can be neurodiverse, but a person is neurodivergent. And not everyone who's neurodivergent is diagnosed with a condition. And during the webinar, we'll be discussing the conditions, but also focusing on strengths and areas of challenge across the whole neurodiverse community, including those without a formal diagnosis. So before we move on, let's have a look at the prevalence of neurodiversity. Now, remember that these are estimates, and for those who are diagnosed. So actually, in fact, it could be significantly higher. Now, it's estimated that around 10% of the population have dyslexia, with 4% being severely affected. Between 6 and 10% of the population are thought to have dyspraxia, with 2% being severely affected. Tourette syndrome affects 1 in 100 children, and more than 300,000 people in the UK live with the condition. It's estimated that around 1.1% of the population has a diagnosis of autism, and males are 3 to 4 times more likely to be diagnosed than females. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're 3 to 4 times more likely to have autism, it just means that they're more likely to be diagnosed. Now, between 2 and 5% of the population have ADHD. So 1.5 million adults in the UK have it, but only 120,000 are formally diagnosed. It is quite a long-winded diagnosis procedure. Mears-Island syndrome actually affects 14% of the population, and more than 30% of those will have reading difficulties, ADHD, dyslexia, and autism. And it's estimated that dyscalculia is likely to occur in between 3 to 6% of the population. Now, from that, you should expect to see that around 10 to 15% of our workforce has some form of neurodiverse condition, but actually many more people could be neurodivergent just without a diagnosis. And one question that's important to consider is, well, does it really matter if someone has a diagnosis? Now, from a legal point of view, having a diagnosis can create a level of protection with the conditions classed as disabilities under the Equality Act of 2010. And that gives employers a responsibility, not to discriminate and to make reasonable adjustments to both the recruitment process and the workplace itself. But actually, whether a person has a diagnosis or not, we should be making those adjustments if we want to enable individuals to be able to fully showcase their skills and strengths. So we're going to do something a little bit different now using the chat function. So what I'd like you to do in the chat now is, can you name any famous neurodivergent people? Anyone? So we're going to have a quick look at the chat. Who are the first people that pop into your mind? So I'm just having a look. Elon Musk, Daniel Radcliffe, Harry Potter, Einstein, yeah. Chris Packer. Oh my gosh, we've got loads. Please don't say Ryan Gosling, because I'm going to have I'm Just Ken stuck in my head for the rest of the afternoon. It's been Shania Twain up until, yeah. Oh God. The Oscars, that pink suit, iconic. Absolutely iconic. Greta. Oh, we've got loads of suggestions here. Oh yeah, from Made in Chelsea. Yeah, it was talked loads about on I'm a Celeb as well, which was brilliant, wasn't it? Really nice to get those conversations going. So we know loads. Okay, there are loads of people out there who are neurodivergent. So we can have a look at the next slide. We've got a bit of a list of those that we've compiled. Now, obviously, there are loads more famous people out there who are neurodivergent. But we'll have a look now to see the ones that we've got up on the screen. So let's have a look. I can have the next slide, please. Right. So loads, and some of which you will recognize that we had in the chat function there. Now, just looking at how big the list is, it clearly shows that neurodiversity isn't a barrier to success. Okay, and personally, I would argue that it's actually one of the reasons that a lot of these people are successful. Okay, because we've got inventors and entrepreneurs and politicians where things like free thinking and different views are incredibly helpful. Then we've got musicians and actors and authors where creativity is highly valued. And then our sporting heroes, where determination and resilience realistically are the key factors to success. Okay, so I'm sure you can start to see why we would want to attract and recruit neurodiverse talent into our business. Now, neurodiversity literally means diversity of the brain. Okay, so we know that people who are neurodivergent are going to think differently. Now, some of these things can be a distinct advantage in the workplace, and that's why there are lots of companies out there who are specifically looking for neurodiverse employees. So if we consider why for a moment, neurodiversity is linked with creativity and imagination, which isn't surprising because people think differently. You know, there's this natural curiosity which helps people investigate situations in a different way. And many neurodivergent people are tuned into detail and they're able to spot things that most people wouldn't necessarily notice. But they're also, you know, able to see beyond the obvious and beyond that initial information and focus. So we take that strategic or even that holistic approach. Now, if you combine those two things together, you can see why neurodiverse people are great when it comes to identifying errors or seeing patterns in information and things like trends in data. Now, lots of neurodiverse people are able to see things in a visual or a 3D way, which is thought to be a much quicker way of accumulating thoughts into a single concept. Now, if you layer those abilities on top of each other, then, I mean, let's face it, it's no wonder that one of the biggest strengths is problem solving. So the neurodiverse brain is set up for being analytical and being logical. So using the patterns or the concepts identified to see a way through a problem and in turn often finding a unique solution. Now, despite and often because of the challenges that neurodiverse people face, they're likely to have developed some personality characteristics which are highly valued at work. So many people will be thorough and methodical, you know, with the ability to work on a task through to completion, even if that means a lot of repetition. You know, they'll work hard to achieve a result, being reliable and being conscientious. And through their own experiences of challenges, you know, other characteristics can be incredibly well developed. There's this determination and resilience and motivation which helps them overcome workplace challenges. Plus, for some, those difficulties can give them a level of empathy and understanding for others and their struggles too. So we know a little bit more about specific strengths and skills that can be helpful. So let's consider the other reasons as to why attracting neurodiverse talent can be good for a business. Now, not only do you have access to this neurodiverse talent pool, you know, if you become known as an inclusive and supportive company, but you'll actually be able to attract talented applicants who are specifically looking to work for an employer that brings some level of social value. Now, that will include other people who have disabilities, those who come from diverse backgrounds, but also job seekers who just want to work for that business who brings that social impact to the table. And having a diverse workforce helps your business be more representative of the community that you serve. And that in itself can help you to secure, engage with, and even retain more customers. Now, it can also enhance your overall reputation and just help you stand out. So help that brand stand out from the crowd. And you can also gain better access to the purple pound, which is the spending power of disabled households, which is estimated to be around £249 billion a year. My poor little brain can't even comprehend what £249 billion looks like. Now, diversity in your workforce can have a huge positive impact on staff engagement and provide opportunities for all colleagues to learn and to develop. And there might be opportunities for colleagues to get involved in coaching and mentoring, and managers will develop knowledge that can support the whole workforce and not just those who are neurodivergent. There are a range of businesses that have identified that the skills and qualities of neurodiverse people are at a distinct advantage to their business, and they've started specific recruitment programs. Large software and financial consulting companies like Microsoft, JP Morgan Chase, Goldman Sachs, Dell, SAP HP, Google Cloud, the list goes on, have all introduced programs to recruit neurodiverse and or autistic people. A spokesman for GCHQ said, Some of our most talented and creative people have a neurodiverse profile, from people with autism spectrum conditions to dyslexia and dyscalculia and dyspraxia. Apologies for the dog, you can hear it. For the last 20 years, we've had specialised neurodiversity support services who offer training, and so that managers can help staff with any adjustments they need to reach their full potential. And there's loads of examples of adjustments to the recruitment process that they've made, and that includes things like allowing people to bring notes and mind maps into interviews, and having extra time to compensate for a potential slower processing speed, and ensuring candidates aren't being asked multiple questions at the same time, and things like using a whiteboard or flip chart paper to car park questions to return to later. So really think about it. You know, isn't it worth taking the time to reflect on the roles in your business where these skills and these strengths that I've talked about can just give you that real competitive advantage? And just consider, you know, how can you improve your recruitment process, you know, so you don't screen out that neurodiverse talent. Now, me and Martha, the dog, are going to pass over to Kath now, who's going to talk us through attracting more neurodiverse applicants.
Thanks, Alice. So clearly from that first part of the presentation, you know why the talent is going to be something useful to business. So my section is really about how do you go about attracting and recruiting and onboarding somebody who is neurodivergent, so that you can really make the most of all of those skills and strengths that Alice has been talking about. So firstly, it's about where and how you advertise. So most organisations use job search sites, and that gives you quite a wide reach, but it doesn't really guarantee that you're going to reach that specific neurodivergent audience. So you could seek out some specialist sites and agencies. So Even Break, Equal Approach, and RIDI are things to have a look out for. And there are 2 UK sites specifically about neurodiverse talent called Exceptional Individuals and ENA. So you could actually have a look at those organisations. You could link up with providers of employment programmes, so a number of national employment programmes such as Work and Health or Restart, plus there's also some local programmes in most areas. People are often attracted to work for organisations based on what they know about them, and first impressions do really count. And you can have an influence over that in a number of different ways. Your website needs to be accessible, with ideally the ability to change the size of text and the colour and contrast of the site if possible. And you should be able to use assistive technology with your website and the recruitment section in particular. People often look for content which suggests that you are an inclusive and supportive employer. So this might be looking at your mission and values section, look out for diversity in your case studies, or seeing if you have accreditations such as Disability Confident. Then when we come to the actual adverts, the aim is to attract a diverse set of applicants. So every effort needs to be made to not to put people off by the language that you use. You need to be clear and concise in what you write. Try to avoid jargon, technical language, abbreviations or acronyms. In your job descriptions, the duties you describe need to be the essential, frequent and regular duties. Mentioning tasks that are done only twice a year, that which somebody might find challenging, could mean that they don't apply, when in reality it could be a simple process of reallocating that task to a different person in the team as a reasonable adjustment. Within your job descriptions and person specs, it's a good idea to classify your essential and desirable skills separately. So again, the applicant is not put off if they can't show one particular desirable skill. It's good practice to focus on generic skills rather than particular methods or software, and again, or equipment, for example, because the person might not apply if they can't use that equipment or software, or they can't use that method, but they're very capable of completing a task in their own way. If you recall, one of the reasons we want to attract neurodiverse talent is to have access to fresh ideas and different ways of working. So why would we want to screen that out? So we've looked at the strengths of neurodiversity. At this point, I'm just going to do a quick recap of some of the challenges that being neurodivergent in a neurotypical world may present. And those challenges will be presented in the recruitment process as well as in the workplace. So again, I'm just going to briefly highlight a few challenges of the 4 main conditions. These are generalizations, but I just want to give you a bit of context to the adjustments we're going to make to the process later on. I'd highly recommend you look into our other webinars around other neurodiverse conditions, or think about training or other information around these conditions more specifically, but I'm just needed to give you a bit of a head start. So in general, autistic people are likely to struggle with social communication and interaction. due to mainly to their difficulty with non-verbal communication and social cues, which they might find difficult to interpret and use. They may struggle with words with double meanings, and that's due mainly to their literal interpretation of language. In general, autistic people prefer routine and structure and can find change difficult. This is related to difficulty they may have with flexible thinking or imagining what could happen, which also makes it harder for people to understand what other people are thinking and to why other people have different opinions. It can also be associated with sensory sensitivity to things like noise, light, textures, or smells, and some people experience sensory overload as they cannot filter out sensory input. Those with ADHD are likely to have difficulty with concentration and focus, including wandering attention, being easily distracted, finding it hard to go back to a task after an interruption, or a tendency to flip from one thing to another. There may also be an impact on their ability to be organised and remember things. So planning, prioritising and timekeeping might be difficulty as well. Some people may seem disorganised with a cluttered workspace or tendency to misplace things. Some people have impulsivity, leading to impatience, interrupting others or acting or speaking without thinking. And those that are affected by hyperactivity are often highly energetic or easily bored. Dyslexia is most associated with reading, writing and spelling issues, with people struggling to read fluently, to understand new words or express themselves as well in writing as they do verbally, as well as a tendency to sometimes make spelling and grammatical errors. The dyslexic way of thinking also affects organisation, processing and memory. So again, planning, prioritising and multitasking can be more difficult. People may also need more time to process their thoughts before answering, and short-term and working memory may also be affected. And finally, dyspraxia. Dyspraxic people may have similar issues with organisation, processing and memory, alongside some difficulties with misunderstanding or misreading information. Dyspraxia also affects fine motor skills such as grip and dexterity, and gross motor skills, so people may have unusual gait or balance issues. And some people with dyspraxia also have heightened sensitivity to light, temperature, sound or touch. So there's quite a number of common themes across these conditions, and of course similar issues may be experienced by people who have traits but without a formal diagnosis. So if we bear this foundation information in mind, let's have a look at some of the potential challenges or barriers that we inadvertently may have put in our recruitment processes for neurodivergent people. Let's sort of take it step by step or stage by stage. So most organisations use an online application process, which could be difficult for a number of reasons. Quite often they don't work very well with assistive technology. They may also have timed elements to them, so thinking time is limited. So simple adjustments such as offering a Word document, which is an equivalent application form, or the ability to send in a CV can remove some of these barriers straight away. Many businesses also use some form of screening questions in the process. Again, these are often timed, which can be an issue. Sometimes these are also scenario-based, which is a real challenge for those who struggle to imagine what ifs. So you could simply skip these as an adjustment, or actually try and find a different way of measuring the skill or knowledge along the way. If your business uses assessment days, then it's worth considering if these actually assess the skills that are used in the job. Most often, there will be some form of group activity involved, but actually this is only really relevant if the role includes a large proportion of group or team working, for example. So if you're not assessing an essential skill, then maybe it's time to review if this is helpful to the process. Even if it's not, it's still relevant, you can find an alternative assessment method for that person who has neurodiverse condition, because actually that's a reasonable adjustment to make to the process. Formal interviews can be difficult. One issue is how someone's behaviour may be interpreted. So for example, a lack of eye contact might be seen as lack of interest. Fidgeting might be seen as excessive nervousness. So it can really help if interviewers are made aware of any neurodiversity in advance, so they can discount this in the decision making. Some people might struggle to understand or follow complex questions, or indeed, as Alice mentioned earlier, multiple questions. So again, plain English can really help. Or if necessary, they could be accompanied by a supporter who can clarify and explain things if needed, not answering the questions for somebody, but almost providing an interpretation, if you like. If memory might be an issue, then why not allow all applicants to take in their CVs, application forms, or notes to prompt them? All of this is not designed to give advantage to people who are neurodivergent, but actually to remove disadvantage. And actually, in the end, that means you get to see the real person and their true skills and strengths, which actually increases the quality of your recruitment. So once you have recruited, there are still a number of steps to employment that you and the employee will need to go through. And let's see how we can make this more effective for both parties. So there's likely to be a considerable amount of paperwork to complete. So for new neurodivergent employees, they might need help with managing this amount of paperwork. So you could provide them, for example, with a checklist to make sure that they have kept track of everything that they need to submit. You might need to provide examples or templates to help people understand what they need to complete and how to complete it. And actually, you may need to offer some direct support to help them with that completion of paperwork. We've talked more about the types of adjustments needed in other webinars, but it's worth considering at the point of onboarding if the individual needs to make an application to access to work to help with their funding for adjustments. But Helen's going to talk a little bit more about this later on. There can be some useful practical things that can help with onboarding too. So you might want to offer a tour of the premises to help people to get orientated and navigate around the building, particularly on a larger site. This may also provide them an opportunity to talk through with them unwritten rules of the workplace, such as where you hang your coat, put your lunch, who makes the tea, who stacks the dishwasher, all of those added kind of extras to the workplace that perhaps don't come as part of formal induction. It can also help for people to meet some of their new colleagues in advance, perhaps individually or in smaller groups than they might do on their first day, because that might be a bit overwhelming for people. And if you are putting into place a workplace buddy or mentor, it could be a good opportunity for them to meet and catch up with that person before they start at the job. So lots of information that I've guided you through the recruitment process, and thinking about moving on to the workplace. There's a few things that you might want to you need to have a really good quality conversation with somebody before they start. I'm just going to think about 5 questions that could really start opening up that conversation, really gather that high quality information so you can start to discuss and agree any adjustments that person might need in the workplace to help them to really showcase all of their skills. So how does your condition affect you at work? So we might ask them to talk about previous examples and how it's worked in other workplaces. How can we make the most of your strengths and skills? Really important to have a very positive question at the start, so it isn't just about solving problems at this point. What potential challenges do you experience at work? And kind of trying to investigate how you can preempt and prevent or mitigate some of those challenges. What changes in the way that they work would help you or could help you? Again, previous examples could be included, and this is a question that I would revisit after a few weeks in the job as well. And finally, and one of the most important elements is, what do you want others to know about you and your condition? So for some people, they want to keep it very private and they don't want anybody in the team to know. Other people are quite happy and would like everybody to have a little bit more information up front. So hopefully, based on those questions, you'll be able to start the discussion about workplace adjustments. And I'm going to hand over to Helen, who's going to talk you through a little bit more around workplace adjustments and the benefit of workplace assessments.
Lovely, thank you, Kath. So I'm talking about workplace assessments and what they are, how they can help your sort of employees and new staff. So now that we've kind of followed our staff through the process, we've got them onboarded and we've started those conversations, it's kind of like the next part is, what can we do to help? We've got them into that post, now what? So this is where the workplace assessments come into their own. So they essentially can be crucial to employees as they address many barriers that they encounter when they are at work. There's some employees that don't necessarily feel confident or comfortable talking about their difficulties and their barriers to their new employers. They can find that as another sort of reason as to why their employers may want to, maybe not sort of get them through their probation periods, for example. So this is where workplace assessments again come in really nicely there. So it's someone who is impartial to the business, and they look at it from an employee's perspective. So all workplace assessments are carried out by qualified assessors. They aim to identify solutions and look to sort of impose reasonable adjustments, should we say. So this is where, you know, we would look at the challenges experienced by the employee in their job, which arise because of their disability, and what we can do to then overcome said barriers. So they're designed to explore any concerns and difficulties an employee may have or expect to experience as well. Appreciate if they are new to the role, they don't necessarily know what is just around the corner and what they're going to find difficult. So it is good for workplace assessments to actually come back, and we tend to tell people around about 3 years, if we can, sort of look for that sort of goal, to be able to identify if there's any further solutions or any further barriers that have came up. During the assessment, the employee can discuss their difficulties with the assessor, and they will work together to find the most suitable solution and or recommendation. Most importantly, they are barrier-led. They are approached holistically as opposed to following a clinical style model. From this, there are suggestions that are made. So the recommendations that are made and some suggestions that are made on a case-by-case basis. So if we move on to the next slide, we can have a little look at some of the recommendations that do come from said workplace assessments. It can be a variety of things. So workplace assessments aren't just for neurodivergent individuals. It can be any individual. So we can look at ergonomic equipment in the workplace assessments. So that's things like, you know, ergonomic mice, ergonomic chairs, height adjustable desks, anything that's got a physical, even if someone with a neurodiverse condition, you know, experiences things like difficulty with typing, they might find if they're more comfortable within that typing environment, that things might come into play a bit easier for them. So never ever rule out physical equipment for something that is sort of classified as a mental condition as well. Goes without saying, assistive technology and software is a huge part of workplace assessments. In the area that we are in at the moment, there's a big focus on technology and how that can actually aid us. I'm aware there's a big push on AI technology as well that can help people with report writing and things like that. So there's a huge push with talking about assistive technology and software within workplace assessments. Things like dictation software for those who may struggle to get all the knowledge out of the head down onto a piece of paper, but they have the skill, they have the knowledge. So if they're able to just speak what they want to say and what they want to write, then they're able to get that knowledge out and showcase what they know. Same thing with mind mapping software, for example. This can be used in many different ways. It can help individuals with organising. It can also help them with, you know, understanding processes. So using flowcharts, for example, and making it a bit more interactive for that individual. From a workplace assessment point of view, we've actually seen a lot of employees take the software, but actually the employers have really liked the idea of the software and have rolled it out to the business as a whole, because they like what it can do. So it's actually opened doors for employers as well as employees. We also offer strategy coaching through workplace assessments. So this is one-to-one coaching for the individual. Usually they do sort of cover areas like task management, organisational skills, you know, developing memory techniques, for example. But it's not to say that's only what they look at. They look at a huge variety of things. So sleep hygiene can be looked at. It can be just general kind of communication skills. Anything when it comes to interview skills as well can be looked at within coaching. We've had great feedback from coaching at the moment, and just how essentially life-changing coaching can be. Again, it opens up so many doors that people don't even realise, you know, we're there, you know, and it can engage a lot more conversation. Again, it offers that comfortable space of a one-to-one support there as well. Human support can also be provided as well, should anyone feel that they need support with orientation, for example, if they need support, if they're having to work on location, with travel, that kind of thing. We can also look at travel support. So if you have someone, say, for example, who is autistic, and they really struggle with the rush hour traffic, the sort of feel of bus seats, the noise, the smell, you know, everything that is revolving around public transport, really struggle with, and it can cause them to feel, you know, a certain type of overwhelm. We can actually look at sort of recommending travel support and implementing taxis for them, so they have their own way of getting into work, so we can still make, you know, getting into that office work for them. We can also look at disability and technical training. So disability awareness training is very similar to kind of these webinars that we do, but they go into so much more detail about the disabilities, how they sort of manifest in each individual, and how then we can best support them. So it gives you practical tips as an employer, how you can support those employees. We also do the technical training. Goes without saying, even if you are very tech-minded, if you're introduced to a new piece of software, you're going to think, what on earth is going on here? Please help me out and tell me what does what. So that's sort of the crux of that. We do also suggest informal suggestions in recommendations. So this might be, you know, flexible working, changes to working locations, for example, other small things like that, which are more just suggestions from a workplace assessor point of view. Which leads us quite nicely on to the next part, which is talking about occupational health. So workplace disability and access assessors do also work alongside occupational health. So they mutually can agree on adjustments such as equipment, flexible working, a change to the hours or duties, phased return, etc. So things that I've mentioned before there. It is reasonable to say that employees tend to access both workplace assessments and occupational health assessments. There's no kind of exact science behind which one should come first and whether or not they should follow both pathways at all. Some employees prefer to just go down one route and others just the other, or they can coincide. So it should be noted that occupational health assessments are the ones that can formally recommend any contractual adjustments. That's the key difference here. So a workplace assessment is more, the best way I describe a workplace assessment is stuff and person support. So how can we look at things and put things in place that can help that individual from an external point of view? Occupational health is more looking at the crux of the job descriptions and the contracts, etc., and how that can be sort of adjusted. But they do sort of play into their own. As I said before, assessments can open many doors to access support when at work. I know Kath mentioned before about access to work. Access to work can actually be opened up by access and workplace assessments. Access to work is a government scheme that supports people with physical or mental health conditions, or anyone with a classified disability to either get into or stay into work. It's not actually widely known, the scheme, although it is becoming increasingly more sort of evident that it is there, predominantly through sort of the uplift in workplace assessments and employers realising, hey, we can actually, you know, look at things from a different perspective here. We don't have to go through certain routes anymore. We can just say, hey, what can you do to help us? And then they will then sort of essentially warm hand over to access to work. They can actually help if they offer case management to guide employees through the access to work process as well. So it's not something that is so daunting for them. They can actually open up a lot of support. So the maximum grant for this year is £66,000, and that is per employee per year. It does get reviewed every year, every tax year. So we're expecting next month for that maximum grant amount to actually rise again. It goes in line with sort of everything else sort of going up there. Access to Work have several pots of funding to cover different areas of support as well. However, the only thing that it is worth noting with Access to Work is it may not be available to people receiving particular benefits. Obviously, it is on a case-by-case basis, so it's still we still sort of encourage people to look into it, maybe apply for it and see what Access to Work are happy to kind of award. It does inevitably come down to the guys at Access to Work and DWP to have a look at what benefits people are already receiving, if they're receiving any at all, to then make that award. But again, that does come from the workplace assessment. So ultimately, having a workplace assessment will provide a wealth of information. So if we skip to that next slide, we can see some of the areas that you can actually sort of get from a workplace assessment. So like I've said, knowledge and information. So the workplace assessors are qualified individuals. They've probably been assessing for many years. If they're new to assessing, they tend to have a very, very in-depth background of disabilities, or they come from a psychological background. So they're very, very skilled and very knowledgeable. They also have the knowledge of, what avenues you can then follow going forward from that assessment, so they can make those recommendations and then help you down those new pathways that have just been exposed to you. They can also promote a shared understanding of expectations as well, so both from employee and employer. This goes back to the reasonable adjustments. They sort of help be that sort of mediator between what is a reasonable adjustment and what is a bit unreasonable, and they can help sort of create this mutual recommendation that is going to work for both parties. That again leads us to that creating that bridge. So they create that bridge between employee and employer. So like I mentioned before, if an employee is new to you and you're a little bit unsure if they've actually shared information with you, or the employee might say, there's a few things I'm worried about, but I don't really want to tell you. It gives them that sort of person that they can go to and discuss their concerns and their barriers, to then sort of create a plan to overcome said barrier there. Essentially, a workplace assessment invests in the health and well-being of employees. So by encouraging employees to go for a workplace assessment, you are sort of saying, look, we want to help you. We want to have these things in place that are going to be able to support you in your workplace. We don't want you to have to feel like you have to overcome several hurdles and barriers throughout your working day. There's things out there that can actually minimise those and make working life so much better. Leading on from this, returning to Alice's point right at the beginning, where she was talking about diagnosis. Can anyone have a rough idea or a rough guess if you think it matters if someone has a diagnosis or not? What do you think? You can pop it in the chat.
When we say chat as well, we mean the little Q&A box. I know some people have been saying they can't see the chat. That's what we mean.
Yeah, I think we've got a surrounding no. Fab. Let's put them out their misery then. Let's show them the answer. Yeah, you're all correct. I think there was a few that thought it did matter, but the majority of you all said no. You're right. Yeah, you are obviously legally protected, like Alice said at the beginning, if you do have a diagnosis. However, a diagnosis is not necessary to unlock the adjustments at work. So everything I've just said there, even to the point of recommending a workplace assessment, thinking this will be a really, really good thing for you to look into, you don't need a diagnosis for. As long as that individual is experiencing a barrier to work, they can come through the workplace assessment process and apply for access to work as well. The only thing that is worth saying at the diagnosis point is an employee can ask for reasonable adjustments even if they've not been diagnosed. However, an employer can request further information. So if they want to further understand what the reasonable adjustments are being sort of requested for, or a little bit more information as to why, they can actually ask for more information. However, employers must make reasonable adjustments when they know or could be reasonably expected to know that someone is disabled or has a disability. They must also make adjustments if the employee in question is likely to be placed at a substantial disadvantage in comparison to a person who is not classified as disabled. So again, that statement lets you know that a diagnosis is not necessary, because the employee must sort of look into these adjustments. It's only if you need further information. And this further information, if they do ask for further evidence, is completely at the employer's discretion as well. Usually the further information or further evidence is a doctor's note or a diagnosis, but it's not necessary. And that is my bit there. I can hand back to Kath on that note.
Brilliant. Thanks, Helen. And I've just been reading all the wonderful questions we've got, so I'm looking forward to the Q&A. But before we move on to that, I just wanted to finish with a little final bit of information about the added information that I mentioned around different neurodiverse conditions. So Apart from our other recorded webinars, which you can find on our YouTube channel, we do offer neurodiversity training, dyslexia training and autism training. And Alice has just finished the first draft of our brand new ADHD training course. So I'm excited we'll be able to launch that one very soon. And alongside that, we actually offer a neurodiversity toolkit. It's a commercial product based on the product that we developed for GCHQ, who we mentioned in the earlier example about the good practice. So their support service that's in place in GCHQ is run by Medigold Health, and the toolkit that we developed is used in that and other security departments. So really the benefit of a toolkit just gives you that ongoing support to line managers about conversations around adjustments, but the main focus of it is a self-help guide. So anybody who believes themselves to be neurodivergent with or without a diagnosis can discover some adjustments that might help them in the way that they work. So if you wanted to know a little bit more about that, just drop us a note, and I'm sure Nicole will send out a bit more information after the session about all of those things that we do. So I'm excited to go on to the question and answers, because I've been answering a few as we go, but it'd be really just sort of interesting to hear some of the ones that we're going to get a chance to answer live. So back to you, Nicole.
Yeah, I shall stop sharing as well so we can see the full panel whilst we're asking the question, going through the question. There's been loads. There has been loads. Thank you so much, everyone. And it's always wonderful to see, because we realise that people are really engaged when we see all these questions coming through. So I think somebody's shared actually, and I think it goes back probably initially for you, Kath, where you mentioned about the 5 questions, and one of those is, how does it affect you at work? And somebody said that actually this person has got ADHD, and sometimes it can be very difficult for them to explain how it affects them at work. So is there any kind of tips that you'd have to kind of garner that information out of the person without, because they're not always sure when they're thinking?
So if, from an individual point of view, I think it's important to perhaps make some notes as you're finding things difficult during an average working week. So making some notes as you go along so you can be quite specific. So as an individual raising it with your line manager, the more detail and specific nature you can have, the better. I'd also recommend having a think about what you think might help. So go in with a solution rather than a problem, because often the line manager is less experienced in ADHD, for example, than you are. So as an individual, I'd always go equipped with some potential ideas for solutions. From a line management point of view, I think you have to start with some really good open questions, you know, normal management questions like, how are you finding work at the moment? Is there anything you need help with? Kind of doing those kind of a normal question opportunities, but being maybe reassuring about the fact that you're willing to make adjustments. So if you've got any examples where other people have had adjustments that within the business, if any good case studies in the business that would show that person that actually it's okay to share and find and sort of pass on that information, because people may not want to disclose because they're feared that they might be treated differently, maybe their career opportunities might be affected. So maybe some reassurance about the positive things that you can put into place, other examples within the business where people have had things put into place might encourage people to feel comfortable to open up. Okay,
fantastic. Thanks, Kath. I think one actually for Helen, well, there's kind of a bit of a theme that's coming through about somebody that Alex Faulkner, thank you, Alex, has said that they can attest to the kind of not needing the diagnosis element, and her partner got the ball rolling with workspace support before she actually got her ADHD diagnosis, which fortunately she also managed to get through her work. But so a great sort of attestation there of the assessment process. But a lot of people are asking, how do they approach, you know, if you are a Medigold customer or if you're not necessarily, but how do you actually approach somebody to get a workplace assessment? What's the pathway there?
Yeah, so we do have a sort of referral process through Medigold. So there's a few links for sort of different people from different areas, so depending on where they come from, just so it reaches the right teams, so the right assessors and the right teams. But yeah, it's all just a link to a referral form, and you would fill in that information and it will go to the relevant teams for that person. But we can pull those links together and share them if people are interested, so I can speak to everyone from all teams and pull those links together for the referral forms.
Thank you. I think that would be really helpful, because there have been quite a few people that have asked that question. A great question here actually, in terms of somebody's identified that a lot of neurodiversity is being increasingly diagnosed for people in later life. So some advice for companies wishing to ask their current workforce, people that actually may already be in the jobs, to disclose where they want to, any new diagnosis or any new situations of neurodiversity. So yeah, how would you go about sort of opening up that conversation for people that might already be in the workplace that haven't maybe spoken about it or put it on their questionnaire?
Well, first of all, I share the link to this video next week for celebrating Neurodiversity Week, and any other YouTube videos on neurodiversity. So they're there as an ongoing resource for you to share within the business. So showcasing that it's something the business is interested in, that you're sharing information, that you're kind of open to the discussions is the first point of call, because people are often reluctant to share information because they're not sure how it's going to be received. And say good case studies, role models in the business, anybody else who's talking about their personal experiences, again, would be another good sort of start the conversation going. Again, maybe offering resources and information just generally, and allowing people to see that neurodiversity is a topic that anybody wants to talk about. And I'd say probably line manager training is probably the thing that might unlock a lot of people's willingness to come forward and actually help a lot of the implementation of these adjustments if the line managers have a little bit of added information and knowledge around the topic.
You've actually answered my next question, Kath. Thank you. You've preempted it. Somebody said, if you have a neurodivergent individual within your team, would it be appropriate to offer training for other members to become more understanding and patient?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, we offer obviously manager training, but we also do individual webinars, sort of awareness and bite-sized sessions for small teams. So, for example, if somebody has a diagnosis and tells their whole team but wants their team to be a bit more experienced and knowledgeable, then we can offer something bespoke to that team as well. So, and I think if the person is willing to do that, I think it will create a more supportive team, and obviously there could be other people in the team who are neurodivergent who haven't disclosed, so good for people to be able to share, because other people will probably feel more comfortable talking about it.
Yeah. Paul, thank you for yours. I think that links in. He's asked, is there a way to assure managers, as there's still quite a stigma around this? And I think actually when I follow up with this, I will give you a link to our YouTube channel, because you'll notice the theme with our neurodiversity webinars, they're very much a celebration. We have to look at that challenges aspect to get to the bottom of some things, but there's very much about those strengths as well. So we're always trying to kind of break that stigma down. So I will share a link to that. Somebody's asked, what are your thoughts on providing interview questions before the actual interview? This appears to be more popular now, but we've heard from some neurodivergent employees that this actually causes them more anxiety.
Why not offer a choice? Why not make it available, and if people want them, they can have them. If they don't want them, they don't have to have them.
Yeah, I actually had a debate about this this morning in a training course. And someone said, yeah, but I don't think that's fair though, because you're trying to do it to give the neurodiverse person an advantage, but actually you're just giving everyone else more of an advantage. And I went, well, stop, address your thinking there for a moment. Does it actually do that? Or does it merely remove the barrier from someone and even out the playing field? And I said, you have to address the language, because it's not leveling it up for someone else. It's just evening it out for everyone. And Kath's point's perfectly valid, because just give that choice. There are going to be things in this world that make everyone anxious. I was anxious because my door went off when I was talking to you, doing my bit, and I went, my postman's going to hate me because I didn't answer the door. And things will make us anxious, and that's normal. You're not actively going to be able to please every single person in the world. If you go out of your way just to please one group of people, well, surely that's then a form of positive discrimination. So that's just asking way more questions than answering questions, to be honest with you. So yeah, just give the choice. It's not giving anyone an advantage. It's just leveling the playing field at the end of the day.
There was another question in the chat actually that I didn't answer, that was around we can't accept CVs, we have to use an application form because of the industry we're in. I was, that's fine. Offer a Word document that can be used with assistive technology, or offer a phone application completion. So for people who can't use the assistive technology, for example, you have the questions on the application form, you ask the questions verbally and you fill it in as the recruiter. Now, people worry about making these exceptions because they think they're going to be inundated with thousands of people all wanting these adjustments. Realistically, you're not. you have the one in 100 people, 1 in 200 people will ask for that particular adjustment. But actually, wouldn't it be worth it if you were to miss out on somebody so talented just because your processes are so static that you're going to miss that person? It's your loss at the end of the day as a business if you do.
I think a big part on the back of that, when you're saying about adjustments as well, and what I've experienced from employers is they've always felt like the words reasonable adjustment is something that is going to be a lot, either high in numbers or high in cost, or that kind of scares them. Whereas actually, from a assessor's point of view, a lot of the adjustments are something very small, and it makes a world of difference. And like I said, it might just be a small number of people. So it's not actually as colossal as you think, and it's not as expensive as you might think. It might be something within the workplace, like changing a light switch from a standard light switch to a dimmer switch. It's not something that's huge, but it's going to make a huge difference.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. People often associate adjustments with some, vast changes, but they don't have to be. They can be quite small, can't they? A few people have asked, I think this is probably one for you, Helen, just a few people have sort of commented on the fact that they're trying or looking into the access to work assessment, but there does seem to, is there a bit of a backlog? Is there any sort of advice?
Yes, there's a bit of a backlog at the moment. So there's different companies can do different things. Obviously, it depends on the company, whether it's sort of a large company or small company. There's some companies I'm aware of are sort of looking at what we say interim funding. So they are covering the cost of any kind of support that requires a cost. So I say not every reasonable adjustment requires a cost, or it could be very small. Like noise cancelling headphones, for example, you can get them for 50 quid. It's not a lot. But if there's adjustments or support that is a lot of money, and they're looking at interim funds, and then when access to work come through, they're then sort of claiming it back from access to work. So I've seen that happen. I've seen other occasions where unfortunately people are having to wait for that access to work. What I will say, if you do have a new employee and they've been with you for 6 weeks or less, if they apply within the first 6 weeks, they are basically put to the top of the pile for access to work. So they will get their awards nice and quickly. It's when they've surpassed the 6 week of employment mark, that's when they then join the queue. And unfortunately, access to work applications, I believe they are starting December's applications now. So there is a bit of a delay there, but there's ways around. I know there's certain pots of funding as well that access to work can guide people to, again, on a case-by-case basis, depending on what it is. And they can guide people to those to access that funding, and again, claiming it back to access to work when that access to work comes through. So there is ways. It's just hard to pinpoint one route because it is very individual.
Okay, thanks, Helen. A couple of people have mentioned as well, it's not actually available to civil service.
I think it depends on and same with sort of benefits and things like that. So there's certain people can and certain people can't. They do look at it every year. So every year when they review the total cap spend, they do review the service as a whole every year as well. So it could, again, I'm not saying it will, but it could be that things do change. If there seems to be a bit more of a demand there, and they need to sort of almost create an extra pot, it could happen. Not saying it will, but it could, because I know they do review the service every year.
Okay, fantastic. Well, that brings us actually to the end of the session, and I just want to say a big thank you to our panelists. Fantastic session there. I always get something out of these sessions myself as well, and a huge thank you as well to our audience for tuning in and looking at the number of questions and the engagement in the sort of questions that we asked throughout. It seems that it was a really useful webinar to everyone that tuned in, which is great. Look out for that email. We will pop the links that we've said that we'll pop in tomorrow. I've made a note. And as I say, share that. We'll also pop in about our YouTube channel, because we've got lots of different webinars as well that sort of about neurodiversity, about workplace assessments that you can tune into as well at your leisure. So yeah, thank you everyone, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thanks. Bye-bye.